Since 2006, on average, a new Nissan Qashqai has rolled off the production line in Sunderland every 140 seconds. So, it's an SUV that has sold in huge numbers, and it's never been far from the very top of the sales charts in the UK. When it comes to updating something so popular, how should you do it? Today, we're in Portugal to find out. If you're unfamiliar with the Qashqai story, it first arrived in 2006 and it's seen by many people as being the car that really kick-started the SUV boom. It obviously wasn't the first ever SUV, but it was one of the first SUVs that wasn't focused solely on being a rough and ready off-road workhorse. Instead, it was basically a family hatchback on stilts. So it offered SUV styling for a reasonable price with a lot of practicality as well, and in the process of its creation it kick-started a whole new class of car, and we've seen many new competitors since then. In 2013 we had a second generation Qashqai, then in 2021 we had the third generation, and this now is a facelift of the third generation car. And for this, Nissan has called in some help from Google. So what exactly is new? Well, it does look different on the outside, doesn't it? The front end has this new look with a larger grille, and apparently these scales are inspired by traditional Japanese armour. It's also got new thin LED lights, a slightly different look at the back as well. And this model that we have here is an N design Qashqai, which is a brand new trim level and features some extra styling touches on the outside, like some gloss black here and there. And there's also some new paint colours to choose from. Inside, there are some different materials and finishes on the dashboard and around the centre console here. There's also some new stitching on some of the upholstery. There have been some improvements as well to the driver display, but we're not talking drastic here. So what it does now is change the colour if you put it in eco mode or sport mode, and there's also a minimal driver display view that you can choose from as well if you don't want to be bombarded with lots of information. But really overall in here, it doesn't really look that much different from before, does it? The biggest thing to point out though is up here with this touchscreen infotainment system. Now on the old Qashqai you would get different screen sizes and different software depending on which trim level that you went for, but now everything gets this new 12.3-inch touchscreen infotainment system, and it runs some stuff from Google on it, which is very helpful because you have Google Maps, you have Google Assistant, both of which are significantly better than Nissan's own sat-nav and Nissan's own voice command. So it's really useful to have those. The shame of it is though that the entry-level trim misses out on it. As for the system itself, it is okay. It's perhaps a slight improvement on the clunkier old system that you had on the Qashqai, but this still has some kind of pointless animation as you swipe between menus, which actually just delays you seeing the thing that you're trying to get to. So that doesn't make much sense. You do have some shortcut buttons on the side of the screen though to help quickly get to some functions. You also thankfully still have physical controls for the air conditioning down here. So it's great to see that Nissan hasn't got rid of that and put it in the touchscreen, as we've seen from so many other rivals happen recently, because it's far more distracting trying to adjust those things while you're driving on a touchscreen than simply using these dials down here. In terms of storage, things are exactly the same as they were before. So you've got this well-placed armrest here with a reasonably sized cubby underneath it and this tray that's attached to it. There's two cup holders. There's a spot for your wireless phone charging if you've got a Qashqai with that fitted. And you also have decent sized door bins as well. And in terms of overall quality, this N design Qashqai that we're sat in looks pretty good because you've got this Alcantara on the dashboard. It's all finished quite nicely. The lineup as a whole does compare pretty well in terms of interior quality to a Kia Sportage, a Hyundai Tucson, but it is still the case, like it was in the previous model, that this isn't going to be troubling something like a Volvo XC40 when it comes to interior plushness. The new Qashqai is exactly the same size as the old Qashqai, so that means in terms of practicality, things are identical to how they were before. So in the rear seats here, you still have a very good amount of legroom, and there is some space for your feet under the seat in front of you as well if the seat in front is in its lowest position. Headroom is also pretty good, especially if you don't have an optional panoramic sunroof fitted. And another very good thing to point out about the Qashqai, this is the same as the old model, but these doors open very wide indeed. In fact, pretty much at 90 degrees. And that might sound like quite a simple thing, but it does mean if you're loading stuff into the back, like a child's seat, it is much easier to do that than in a rival that has a door that doesn't open quite so wide. So that's great that that's still a feature of this facelifted model. Ultimately though, this isn't the most practical family SUV out there. If you had 3 tall adults that you had to sit in the back of a family SUV, then they would be just about more comfortable in a Kia Sportage or a Skoda Karoq. But still, by the class standards, this, in the rear seats, is a practical choice. The Qashqai gets a 504 litre boot, which is the same size as it was before. So that means you'll be able to fit 7 carry-on size suitcases into the back. That is 2 less than a Skoda Karoq, but then that is an extremely practical family SUV. This is still very good by class standards and more than enough for most families' needs. It also comes with a helpful false boot floor, which you can see here in its highest position, leaves you with no loading lip at the front, and it's also split in 2. So what you can do is stick this bit in the middle to create 2 different storage compartments if you want, or you can also remove it to reveal that it's double-sided with carpet over here and a wipe clean surface over there. So in theory, if you put this wipe clean side up, you can chuck it in the back, stick your muddy boots on there, and then very easily clean it after. You can, of course, remove both of these and lower them down to increase the overall capacity available to you in the back of the boot here. But it is actually quite a bit fiddlier having these 2 separate bits to get it in these different positions than it would be if it was just one. Anyway, in this lowest position, you can see you've got a bit more room available to you. You've also, unfortunately, got a loading lip at the front and a step up at the back, but in its highest position, those 2 things disappear. And you've also got 2 storage compartments either side at the front. If you want even more space than this, you can, of course, remove the parcel shelf to help put down the rear seats. And then folding the rear seats down is a simple process, but they only split fold 60/40. So you can see you can only fold them down in 2 chunks. In some other rivals, like an Audi Q3, they offer 40/20/40 split folding rear seats, so you can fold down each of the 3 rear seats individually, but you don't get that in the Qashqai. Still, all things considered, this is a practical family SUV. Let's talk about the trims now, because there has been a change for this facelift, and it's meant that the starting price has gone up. But things aren't quite as shocking as that may sound, because the previous Qashqai started with entry-level Vizier trim, and that meant that the lineup started from £27,000. However, that entry-level trim came with hardly any equipment, and only 1% of buyers went for it. So that's been dropped, and instead the Qashqai range now begins with a centre premium. So that does mean that the starting price has gone up by £3,000, but in effect all that means is that the cheap entry-level trim that no one bought anyway has been dropped. There hasn't been a huge price hike for the trims that remain. They have gone up, but it's only around about £400 or £900 for the range topping version. So that means the lineup starts with a centre premium. Above that you've got N connector. Then N Design, the new trim, sits alongside Tecna, and the range topping version is Tecna Plus. Like before, it looks like N connector is the trim to go for, because it gets things like dual zone climate control, a leather wrapped steering wheel and ambient interior lighting. So it looks like the most recommendable in the lineup. Whichever trim level you go for, you'll get the same standard safety equipment in this Qashqai, and some of the bits of kit have had upgrades for this facelifted model. The Qashqai was given a 5-star crash test safety rating by Euro NCAP back in 2021. The tests have become more stringent since then, but this is still a safe car. It should prove to be pretty reliable as well. In the 2023 What Car Reliability Survey, the Qashqai finished in the top 3rd in its class. But Nissan as a brand didn't do quite so well. You also only get a 3-year or 60,000 mile warranty, which is pretty unremarkable. If you want a better warranty from an even more reliable brand, then look at a Hyundai, Kia or a Toyota. Something that hasn't changed for this facelift are the engine options. So the choices from the pre-facelift Qashqai have been carried over to this new model. So that means there is a choice between 2 mild hybrid options or a Qashqai e-Power.
That e-Power option is an unusual kind of hybrid. It features a 187 brake horsepower 1.5 litre petrol engine, but that only acts as a generator for a battery, meaning electricity is what turns the car's wheels. But there's no need to plug it in to recharge because the engine is what keeps the battery topped up. So it means you benefit from electric car-like acceleration around town and decent fuel economy as well. But it's the most expensive Qashqai, and we found in that car and the same setup in the bigger Nissan X-Trail, the real-world fuel economy really isn't that special. So we'd point you at the DIG T140. It's the cheapest Qashqai with 138 brake horsepower from its 1.3 litre petrol engine, and while it's not quick, it offers decent performance for most situations. The DIG T158 is faster on paper, but it doesn't feel that much quicker in real-world conditions.
So, no changes to the engines, and in fact, no mechanical changes to report on at all for this facelifted model. So that means that the new Qashqai drives in exactly the same way as the old one. And we have driven this car a lot in the UK, we've driven lots of different versions, so we know quite a lot about it. And what we've learned is that in terms of ride comfort, it kind of depends on which version you go for, because the smaller the alloy, the more comfortable the ride.
So that means to get the smoothest ride in Qashqai, you'll want to stick to versions with 17 or 18-inch alloys, which ride well, if not quite as pleasantly as a Skoda Karoq. Qashqais with 20-inch alloys get a slightly more sophisticated suspension setup to try and compensate for the bigger wheel size, but they're still best avoided if ride comfort is a priority for you.
It's not particularly amazing when it comes to handling. It's very competent and fine, but it's certainly not thrilling or fun. It would just be nicer if you had a bit more of a connection through the steering to what the front wheels are doing. But around town and for motorway cruising, this is perfectly pleasant to be in. It's quiet as well. The thing to bear in mind though is that you can spend quite a lot of money on a Qashqai, and at the top end of the lineup, it's in Volvo XC40 territory. And that's where some of the weaknesses of this car feel a lot more pronounced, because the XC40 and other alternatives that cost similar money are really very, very strong. And the Qashqai doesn't really feel like it can compete with those sorts of alternatives. But at the lower end of the lineup, this is still decent on the road. It is a shame though that the engine options do seem fairly weak still. So the new Qashqai is much like the old one. It might not have any truly outstanding qualities, but it's very competitive in lots of areas. So certainly at the cheaper end of its lineup, this is a strong contender in the family SUV class. Thanks very much for watching this review. If you want to see another one, then click up there and make sure you subscribe to our channel. And for a great deal on your next car and to read our written review of the Qashqai, click on that link to go to whatcar.com.